we actually enable the customers to get their data out of Amazon for free. We will pay for them to get their data out.
Hello and welcome to episode 72 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name is Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode we're talking to a company that without question has disrupted the storage market, catering to individuals and corporate data needs with an unwavering commitment to security, affordability and unmatched performance, all while being importantly very transparent and outwardly honest. That company is Backblaze, and I'm joined by Gleb Budman, the CEO and co-founder of Backblaze. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anthony. Good to be on with you.
Excellent. So just before we talk about all things storage and data and disruption of a market that is so huge in this landscape of IT, just want to give a shout out to the show. If you love Great Things with Great Tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link on the show notes or go to GTwGT.com. As a reminder, you can keep up with all of our episodes on all major podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, whatever you like, all hosted and distributed by Spotify Podcasts. As a reminder, head to that YouTube channel. You can see all of the previous 71 episodes on that YouTube channel as well. Hit the like and subscribe and go from there. All right, with that, Gleb, let's talk a little bit about Backblaze. Let's talk a lot about it, actually, not a little bit. We want to talk a lot about it. But firstly, I'm just interested in your background because, Backblaze was founded in 2007, but before that, you worked for some companies that I think some of my listeners would actually know. So give a little bit of background to yourself and lead up into that founding of Backblaze.
Sure. So I've been doing some kind of tech, some kind of entrepreneurship since as long as I can remember. I think when I was 5, my parents talked about how I wanted to disassemble their camera that they had and just poke at it. So been interested in technology my whole life, been interested in entrepreneurship my whole life. I worked on starting a company in the late 90s and then joined a couple other people who were working on something similar. That company was in the search and a little bit of early AI space. That company got acquired by Excited Home, which was a competitor to Yahoo and Google later. And so we did that, worked there until, and then left. And we worked on another company called Mail Frontier that did email security, anti-spam, antivirus, anti-phishing.
Wow.
That company got acquired by SonicWall, which does security for small, medium businesses. And then we left there and started Backblaze.
Wow. So you've talked about, most people would know about SonicWall, right? In terms of a company, especially if you're working in that IT space in the early 2000s, everyone knew about SonicWall. So that's quite interesting. It's interesting as well that you started with a mail filtering and anti-spam and security company as well, because I know my background is, like I say, almost every show is in hosting and service providers. And, I was right in the weeds of leveraging a service when we had our mail server. What do we front it with? We front it with a mail service that screens and protects it. So kind of similar service, right? And getting acquired by SonicWall. So you then said that you started Backblaze in 2007. So interestingly enough, when I did my research here, you seem to have the longest list of co-founders of any company that I've definitely had on the show that I've seen in the industry, right? So just explain how that came to be. And there's 3 questions to this actually. Number 1, how it came to be. Number 2, how what you did to actually make that happen. Because I know that you guys basically took a lot of risk in stopping what you were doing, maybe not getting paid for a year or whatever it might be, and do this. And then how does that work moving forward? Because that's a lot of co-founders to deal with within a company.
Yeah. So I was very lucky. When I worked on the company that I met up with in '99, I met 2 people at that company. One is Brian Wilson, who was a technologist, and one was Casey Jones, who was a designer. And both of them were excellent at their crafts. And when our company was acquired by Excite, I met 2 more people there. One was Tim Newfire, who was also a technologist, and Bill Yang, who's also one of the architects there. And all of us then went on to work on building Mail Frontier, and all of us worked at SonicWall when Mail Frontier was acquired. And so when we were starting to work on Backblaze, we basically brought the band together again. And what I'll say is the way that Backblaze got started was actually my then co-founder, Brian, did IT for friends and family the way that many of us do.
Yep. It's why I
And
don't. It's also as a side note, it's why I don't do it now. But that's we all dabbled in that when we were a bit younger, right?
it's impressive that you've been able to yank yourself out of it, because
Oh,
I
it's in
feel
my
like
in my contract.
in your contract, I feel like the contract with friends and family and others is that social contract is hard to break. So he did it for just friends and family. Obviously, no payments involved, but and one of his friends had a computer crash, and she called him up in a panic and said, "You've got to help me. My computer crash. Help me out." And he said, "No problem. We'll get you set up. I'll get you a new laptop. I'll get your applications installed. Where is your backup?" And she starts pounding the table and says, "Look, what I don't need now is a lecture. What I need is for you to get me my stuff back." And he's like, "How is that possible? What do you mean? You don't have a backup?" And he's like, "I can't help you if you don't have a backup." And he had always been absolutely religious about backups. And religious, I mean, to the level of, for our prior company, even though we had an IT department whose job it was to ensure we had backups of all the servers, he would burn a CD and burn a DVD of
Wow.
the source every week, stick it in an envelope, and mail it to his brother in a different state, and then do the same thing and stick them in his own closet. And he did that every week the whole time. And it turned out when the company got acquired, we had some of the systems were protected by RAID, and one of the IT people pulled the wrong drive out when one of
Happens.
the drives died, and blew away the RAID array, and ended up losing the data, and we had to recover from Brian's personal collection of CDs and DVDs. So
Wow.
he was religious about it, and so we just started talking about that and saying, okay, this is 2007. Everything is going digital. Everyone's getting laptops. Everything's going to be digital. And if no one's backing up their data, it's all going to vaporize. And so we just started talking about that and then saying, this is a problem that should get fixed. And so he had quit SonicWall, and then I quit, Billy, and then Tim joined, and Casey joined, and all five of us got together to work on that problem.
Yeah, that's awesome, because that's number one. I think that's one of the coolest 3-2-1 rule of backups that I've heard, in terms of burning into a CD, burning into another CD, and storing it in different locations, and it was actually used. But I think the main thing there is that the spark for the company was started by a necessity, and something where there was a hole. Like, how do these people that just have laptops and whatnot, that aren't part of corporate IT, that are thinking this way, and even back then backup wasn't even really front of mind like it is today. How do we protect and help these people? So that's quite interesting there. So what was the original idea of how did you go and say, okay, well, we're going to go and start Backblaze? But when you sat down and had that first sort of discussion about a company like this, what did it look like? What were you trying? Because at the same time, like you said, IT was evolving. We definitely had AWS and public clouds coming up with public cloud storage with S3, which was roughly around the same time. So it's pretty interesting that you go, well, you know what? I see Amazon, and maybe that back then they were still pretty big and the juggernaut was there, but maybe they weren't as big as today. But you said, we're going to go and do this because we feel that we can fill a hole. So what was the original idea behind the company, and how you'd actually take that problem and make it into a actual company with services?
Yeah, so today we compete with Amazon at 1/5 of their price point, and we have large scale and we have lots of customers. But it didn't start there. When we were starting, we were looking to solve actually the laptop desktop backup problem.
Yep.
And that came from this specific situation that Brian ran into. And what we said was, there are solutions out there, right? There are computer backup solutions out there, but for some reason, what we found when we asked around, they weren't being used. Very few people used all of those services, and most people were just losing data left and right. And so we said, what is the issue? And what we found was that there were two problems. One problem was every single one of those solutions asked the person, hey, what do you want to back up? Tell us which files, which folders do you want to back up? And the other was they said, we'll charge you per gigabyte. And at the time, especially focused on consumers, what we realized was consumers have no idea where their files and folders are, and they didn't know what a gigabyte was. And so that approach was just way too complicated. And so we came up with this idea where we flipped it upside down. We said, we're going to back up everything on your computer. If it's not explicitly excluded, we're going to back it up. It doesn't matter where the files are, where the folder are. You don't have to know anything. The entire experience that we wanted was that you pick an email address and a password, you click download, that's it, you're done, you're safe, and you can sleep peacefully at night. That's what we wanted to build.
Yeah.
And when we started thinking about that, our plan was actually to not compete with Amazon at the time, but to use Amazon. We were going to use Amazon S3 as the underlying storage for our computer backup service. And then we did the math and said, well, that's interesting. I think we're going to lose money on every customer.
Yeah,
and
not the best business sort of scenario when you're looking at profitability and a return, right?
Not the best business structure. And so we said, it's weird because if you look at a hard drive, the hard drive itself is not that expensive, but Amazon was very, very expensive. And we said, some way there's got to be to attach hard drives to the internet. And if we could figure out how to do that, there might be a way of making this cost efficient. And so we actually started by trying to attach hard drives to a whole bunch of USB hubs.
Okay.
And daisy chaining hard drives off of one server to a bunch of USB hubs. Turns out doesn't work at scale. We tried, FireWire. We tried a variety of different solutions. We finally came up with a hack that would work where we took a variety of direct attached storage devices and attached 9 of them to one motherboard. And that worked, but it was very clunky and clumsy. Yeah. And so we ended up designing a plywood server, like a little plywood box server. And we deployed that in a data center in San Francisco and tested it, and it worked. Right. And so then
And they let you put the plywood in a data center?
So then we got a company that would cut us sheet metal in units of 1, and they cut us the shape that we needed. That was basically this plywood box, but with for the hard drives. And we ended up having it, and we called it furniture. It was furniture for the hard drives. We didn't want to expect anything from the hardware. And we basically set down this path of designing and building our own storage cloud. And the only reason for that, again, it wasn't to compete with Amazon. It was because we needed storage that was efficient and affordable and durable for our computer backup service, which at that point was a consumer computer backup cloud service. And that's where we started.
Yeah. So that was servicing, literally like Macs and Windows desktops effectively, right? And
Macs and Windows, exactly.
And I guess when you're talking about the concept of, or the theory of backing up everything, then, and exclusions can come into play. But if you're thinking about everything and making it easy, people almost don't want to exclude because they feel they don't have to, which means they're going to pump up stuff that they don't necessarily need to back up, but they're backing up anyway, which in effect means that you need to back up more storage, more data. And I think that's part of the problem that you were trying to solve there. So you have got a very distinct design, and people that know Backblaze know the fire red. It's a beautiful red color that you guys have on your bezel, and I guess this was the first foray into what was the storage pod architecture at the time to be able to build this out. So what did that? You've got the plywood and the sheet metal, and then effectively these storage pods effectively become like a bank of I guess chassis with a lot of drives in them connected to a motherboard. got to be some software or whatever that sits on top of it to manage it. Did you use off the shelf stuff, or did you guys design your own sort of management software to be able to handle the storage and the redundancy and the resiliency and whatnot?
We wrote it all basically from scratch. I mean, we had Linux, so there
Yep.
was definitely some things that we were built on, but we literally built the entire file system, this internet scale file system from scratch. So we built all the erasure coding, the durability, the redundancy, the performance, the availability, all of that code is our code. It's it's millions of lines of code that's now been written over 15 years
Yep.
to do that. But we had to build all of that. And you talk about the evolution of the pods, and the whole idea with the pods for us was we wanted hardware that would just have these hard drives, and no one was selling hardware that was inexpensive. So we looked at Dell and we looked at EMC and we looked at NetApp, and all of those systems were 10 times the price of the storage for the hard drives. And so we said, we can write all of that in software. So if we can do all that in software, all the performance, all the durability, all the availability, all we need is furniture for the hard drives. And so the pods were that. And like you said, we ended up making them this Backblaze red. And so we have these photos of just rows and rows and racks of Backblaze red pods, which is fun and makes for fun imagery.
Yeah.
And we had interesting, we open sourced that hardware design. So in 2009, we actually wrote a blog post called Petabytes on a Budget.
Wow.
And it was all about, here's what we've designed. We've designed this server, and it's really inexpensive if you want to store a whole bunch of data. And we will open source the hardware, not the software. The software is all of our secret sauce. It's this scale file system. But we open sourced that, and it was a really eye-opening moment for us, because I as one of the co-founders, I started blogging for us when we started. I just started writing about storage and about backup and whatever I could find that was interesting. And maybe 4 or 5 people would read my blog posts. 2 of them would probably relatives of mine.
Yeah, I'm sure more, but yeah, but I know you feel. Sometimes when you write this stuff, you don't know who's reading it, but yeah, I get that understanding. But it was out there, you were creating content, and it was good content.
Thank you. And it was, but it wasn't, there wasn't anyone in mass reading it. And then we published this one blog post about the storage pod, and 1 million people read that one blog post. Wow. It went absolutely viral. It really kind of opened our eyes. We said, how many people are going to actually care about a big storage server? And it turned out a lot. And so we had all kinds of inbound interest of Netflix reached out to us and wanted to understand how we did it, so that because they wanted to do a caching server for all of their video footage. We had the Internet Archive reach out to us and talk to us about how we did that, because they were looking for newer ways to store all of that data. And just there's a lot of interesting conversations that spurred.
Yeah, I think at that time as well, if I think about my career at that point, when I was very much full into platform design, architecture, trying to work out how to spend some money efficiently, but also mean that we had efficiency on the other end with storage. It was always a problem. And going with the major vendors of the day was okay, and they offered a certain amount of security. And when I say security, in terms of you knew what you were getting, but you also knew that you were potentially getting performance issues at certain amounts of data, or a write controller might fail, or then in some cases, you want to be in a couple of racks, but some solutions will be over 20 racks, right? So there was all these permutations that if you didn't want to go off on a limb and do what you guys did and try and solve the problem of big scale storage in an efficient way, you just kind of had to sit with the incumbents, and a lot of people struggled with that. And I know that we when I was in a particular role, looked to try and do something differently, and we did, but we didn't do it as open as what you guys are doing it. And it failed miserably because we got sold down a river and the architecture didn't work, and it all caused all sorts of problems. So I think during that time period, there were a lot of organizations, a lot of service companies, a lot of service providers looking to try and solve this problem of scale and data, because it was just starting to explode. It was just starting to get to a point where all of a sudden a VM or a virtual machine wasn't consuming 10 gigs, it was consuming 100. And now if you think about that today, that's a 10x or 1,000x what it was then, right? So it's even more incredible today. But I think that's what's really interesting about you guys, that you went out on a limb initially and did this, and you're very committed to this open computer as like open cloud project as well, which sounds to me like that's in your particular DNA as well.
It is. I mean, I think it's one of the things that from the early days, we said that the internet is a big place, and this is a big opportunity. And we're not going to do everything for everybody, but we can help a lot of people in a lot of ways. So early on, one of the ways that we helped was we open sourced this design and said, whoever wants to use it, here's a design you can use. And we certainly felt like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We got to use Linux, and we got to use SSL, and we got to use all these things that other people and other companies and other organizations had built, many of which then they shared in open source. And so we wanted to give back some of that. Today, one of the things that we look at is open cloud in a way of the cloud has shifted. And it used to be that for many, many years, Amazon was the cloud.
Yep.
And it started off being just, okay, they have storage, maybe they have compute. And then Amazon started having this service, this service, this service, this service. Now they have 200 services that they offer you. And for a while, that was just, everybody considered that the default path. And in fact, Amazon at some point even said, you're not allowed to use the term multi-cloud because we are the cloud.
Yes, that's
right?
it. It still happens today. Yeah.
Right. And so they're trying to make you believe that there is no other choice. But certainly there's, in addition to Amazon, there's obviously Google, and there's Azure, and there's Oracle. But then increasingly, companies also want these specialized clouds. They want these best of breed services. You see that with Stripe for billing, or Twilio for communications. You have Fastly and Cloudflare and others for networking. You have these different companies that are focusing on a particular part of the tech stack and trying to provide a lot of value in that part of it. And so for Backblaze, we are doing that with storage. And we believe that storage is this foundational part of the tech stack. And if you do it really well, it's a really important part of the tech stack. But that doesn't mean we're going to just lock you in. You can only use us. The whole point is you use us for storage. Maybe you use Vultr or DigitalOcean or somebody for compute. Maybe you use Cloudflare or Fastly or Akamai or Bunny or somebody for networking. You use these other different providers for building up the best of breed cloud infrastructure that you want for your company. And that's what we talk about when we talk about the open cloud. It's not being locked into AWS's walled garden, and which they very much try to keep you in through expensive egress fees and complexity to get out and all of that.
Yeah, I think the egress fee is obviously something that I talk about often with certain. I've had a lot of on-premises object storage companies on the show. Certainly, the egress is a big part of why people choose to look at them, and then why they look at you. And if you can offer a similar service at 1/5 the cost, like you guys do, that's very, very compelling for a business, for a technologist. But I think the concept of that open cloud and where we are today, what I've started seeing is definitely a pullback from this notion of the public cloud hyperscalers are the all-in panacea of the cloud. And we've seen instances lately where there's been specialized clouds. I've had a few on the show, like Sushi Cloud, Bare Metal. There's lots of PhoenixNAP doing Bare Metal. You guys actually work with one of our, from Veeam's perspective, the company I work for, we work with a partner of ours to basically offer the storage component of an open DR service, of which you are the storage. You've got PhoenixNAP, and then continuity centers provide the actual software to do the business. So the best bits of the cloud today, I think, are being used for the best outcome for the customer. And that's because there's so much great technology, so much great innovation, but also choice out there, and people understanding that you just don't go to AWS as a default anymore. In fact, you might actually not do that by default. You might see what options are out there and then maybe look at AWS afterwards. Not that I don't want to demonize them too much because they obviously do a great service and they're an amazing organization, and I love the technology and what they've pushed. But I think what they've done is they've enabled guys like you to accelerate your businesses as well, right?
Yeah, and I think maybe taking, the one step back. So, we talked about how we started, doing computer backup and building our own infrastructure because AWS was so expensive, and so we had to do it.
Yep.
Where that evolved and what we're primarily doing today. So we then had businesses that came to us and said, I use you for my computer backup for my home. I'm trying to figure out why I have a better backup product with you at home than I have at the office for 10 times the price. So let me use your cloud backup service in my business. And so we expanded to that. And then those companies came to us and said, I use you for all my laptop desktop backup, but I have all these other storage needs. I need to archive my data. I need to back up my server. I need to sync my NAS. I have this application that I've built. I have all these other storage needs. You've built this amazing storage cloud. Give me access to the actual cloud. And
Yep.
so that then was when we launched Backblaze B2, and Backblaze B2 became this open API storage cloud. It's compatible with Amazon's S3, so it's an easy drop-in solution for anybody that's using anything S3. It's 1/5 the price of S3. It has no egress fees to partners, and if you want to get your data out, you can get 3 times the amount of data out for free. It's fast, it's durable, it's just easy to use, and that's the focus for Backblaze now. It's really leaning into helping customers with that storage need. And like you said, we partner with Phoenix and we partner with Veeam and others to solve specific customer needs. And I think there's some of the great kind of ways that happens, right? So with Veeam, Veeam provides a great service for customers to do backups and ransomware protection, and that data needs to go somewhere. And it's as easy as copy your Backblaze B2 credentials, throw them into the Veeam console, and all of that data is in our cloud, safe and protected, using the Veeam software. Same with a lot of our other partners. So Synology and QNAP are common partners. We do a lot of business where we help customers that have Synology and QNAP systems on premises, and they need that data synced or backed up to the cloud. Again, copy paste into those things.
Made
it just works.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? It was such a hard thing to actually do in the early days. I think so. B2 cloud storage, I think, was introduced in about 2015. Before that, it was actually pretty difficult to the concept of just getting your data up somewhere. As crazy as that sounds today, it wasn't simple because you needed certain things in place. You said it needed protocols, needed networking. It wasn't just what we have today. So I think, you hit the sweet spot in terms of timing to be able to get that service up and running. So I guess from that point of view, I mean, when you had the cloud backup, you got Backblaze now running in 2015. So at that stage, I know at the moment you run about 5 data centers globally. You've got some in the US, Amsterdam, high amount of durability as well. So your nines, they're quite huge, right? And I want to obviously talk about the openness as well, and the fact that you guys do give back to the industry as a whole with regards to your data on the disks and the drives that you actually use, and you give durability data. Is it an annual thing that you do based on that?
So quarterly.
Quarterly. Okay, even better.
Yeah. So years ago, one of the things that happened was people started saying, "Hey, Backblaze, you have a lot of hard drives. Tell me which ones I should buy." And so we obviously keep a lot of statistics and do a lot of analysis on all the drives, and we have hundreds of thousands of hard drives now.
Yeah.
And so what we started doing, and we've been doing this for years and years now, is publishing a quarterly analysis of all the drives in our environment, and by make, model, size, age, and slicing and dicing that data and sharing it out. And so if you go to backblaze.com and go to the blog, we have a section, or go to the About Us page. There's a section there for the drive stats. We have all of the data, all of the resources. You can even download information, and we've been doing that consistently. And that is, it's something that's very powerful and for lots of customers. Interestingly, when we did it, we've thought, one, we may have the drive manufacturers come to us and try to convince us to stop doing that.
Yep. Too honest, too open. Yep.
Too honest, too open, but they've actually really leaned in with us and been great partners. And a lot of what they want is they actually want us using their hard drives, because one of the things that we hear is that their customers wait for our reports to
Wow.
decide which drives to buy, because they want to see what the data shows. And so we've been trying to be open with that and sharing a lot of data. And now we have over 3 exabytes of data that we store for customers.
I was going to ask, that was my next question. How much are you storing now?
Yeah, we have about 3 exabytes. So it's one of the largest clouds on the planet. We store over 500 billion files for customers. So it's large scale, and it's a lot of data. And so we share that information out. So yeah, so we try to be open, we try to be transparent, and we do that about a variety of things. One of the other things that we've started talking more about is we actually mostly bootstrapped Backblaze. We started, you mentioned, going for a year without salary. The 5 of us that started the company, we quit our jobs and committed to each other for 1 year without salary. And that was the initial quote unquote funding round.
Yeah.
The 2 prior companies that we did were both traditional venture funded. We raised rounds, they were acquired. This one we decided to differently, and we said, let's try and make this work by just focusing on product, customers, culture, not going out and raising funding on day one. So we bootstrapped the company. We went for about 1.5 years with 0 salary. We went for almost another year at minimum wage, and then almost another more year at 2 times minimum wage. So it was a very long slog, burning through all of our savings. But it was because we said, we really believe this makes sense. There's this huge opportunity both to build something exciting and to help. So we did that for a long, long time. For 15 years, we raised less than $3 million into the company.
Crazy.
Which is crazy for any startup, but especially for one that's as capital intensive as a storage cloud company, right?
Yeah.
And then we took it public on the NASDAQ in a traditional IPO, not a SPAC. We took it public in 2021, raised about $100 million, got to fly out to New York and push the button and do the whole thing. It was a lot of fun. It was very exciting. And so one of the things that we've started talking about is, what does that journey look like? And if you're building a company that is 10, 20, 50 million dollars in revenue, and you're thinking, maybe at some point I want to take this company public, we're trying to also lay out that trajectory for companies as well.
Yeah, that's really good. So yeah, just continue to feed back and help. That's awesome. Open honesty. Hey, we've only got about 5 minutes, say, left. I really wanted to touch just quickly on, where the state of data is today, because obviously you pump a lot in, in terms into your cloud, and obviously ransomware, the threat of cyber has really raised the understanding that you need to back up your data, but you need to put it into some place that's really safe. You guys just released an immutability feature. That's great with a lot of the backup vendors as well, because immutability ensures that the data is not only there, but it's secure when it's there, when it rests. Where do you see the industry today versus where it was, maybe pre-pandemic, 2019-ish, and then where are you seeing it going with regards to not only, I guess, ransomware, but just in general?
Yeah, so certainly, one of the things that was happening before and happened during and is happening after is this massive move to the cloud. And so there's just an explosion of data, and a lot of that data is just heading to the cloud. So that was happening before, and it's still happening now. COVID, in many ways, the pandemic accelerated some of that because it opened the Pandora's box. So many people started working from home, working remotely. A lot of what we help customers with is actually, we help customers certainly with IT use cases like backup and archive and ransomware protection. And a lot of them had servers that were on premises And then they said, but our IT people don't necessarily want to be going into the office. They're not supposed to be there. And so they started looking at how can we move some of that data offsite and into the cloud. A lot of the people that were there had backups that were local to those systems, but the employees weren't in the office anymore. So the backups had to be remote as well. So then they're like, why are we trying to get the backups into the office when the employees aren't there? So a lot of that happened that way. Clearly, ransomware and everything else is still a big issue. We help with object lock, the immutability feature, like we talked about.
Yeah.
There's some increasing focus on disaster recovery type of scenarios. So it's not only about backup; it's how do you get up and running. And so
Yeah.
we work with partners like Veeam and PhoenixNAP and others, continuity centers, where we've helped work together, where we are the storage cloud, and they provide parts of either the software or the compute infrastructure. We've done an offering where you can spin up a Veeam restore in the cloud, so you don't have to have the infrastructure on premises if you don't have it, if you have a disaster. And we've done that with PhoenixNAP, Veeam, and us, and I think it's a great solution for customers. The other thing is just application developers. And I
Yes.
think application developers early on, some of the application developers got onto AWS because they tend to be the ones that are forward leaning, forward thinking. They're a little bit on the cutting edge, and
A bit
early on,
dangerous. Yeah, they're a bit dangerous.
they may be a little bit dangerous, but they're trying to figure it out and trying to get the best possible choices. And they started on AWS, but increasingly AWS has gotten very complicated, focused on the largest enterprises, on the federal government, and they're leaving behind this large base of application developers that are still innovating and moving fast and trying to get best of breed services. And so we have been increasingly leaning in to help them. And part of that is by providing them amazingly good storage at 1/5 the price that's really fast and durable. But some of that is also about supporting this open cloud ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the trends that we see, is that the application developers are kind of looking up and going, what I was using before is now feels like this kind of older, stodgy, locked in situation, and I want to break out. I want to break free, and I want to go use the best of breed offerings. And whether that's for AI use cases, so I need to use those GPUs that only that company has over there, whether that's other compute, whether that's networking, all the different things. And so we want to be that foundational storage platform where customer can store their data and send it to the company that has the latest GPUs for their AI analysis.
Yeah, I get it.
Send
Yeah,
it
it's
to
awesome.
the network that has the best delivery. Use it in the way that they see free. And so we actually enable the customers to get their data out of Amazon for free. We will pay for them to get their data out if they keep their data with us for a year. So we've helped many
Okay.
customers do that.
That's a special, that's an offering that you guys have. Awesome. So I will definitely link to that in the show notes. In fact, I'll link to a lot of what you guys are doing in the show notes. I think it's so good. I really, I feel the passion that you have for this space and why Backblaze exists. It's not there it's not just a soulless company in my mind. I can see it. This conversation hopefully has shown that to the people listening as well. And it's a great alternative that you've got to think about, because again, the options, the openness of it mean that you can use it in different ways and you can be more efficient. So, hey, that's really amazing. Like I said at the start in our pre-chat, we could talk a long time, and maybe in some other time we'll extend the conversation out in some different way. But it's been really good. I think Backblaze is a great company, really understanding its place in the market and knowing its strengths and what it can do. And I think that's why you've been so successful. It's why you've built this amazing cloud. You've got these great products. At its core, it's pretty simple in terms of what you guys do, but it's become an amazing name in the industry. So really thank you for being on and giving the listeners an insight into where you guys came from and where you're going. So thanks, Gleb, for that. All right, just to wrap it up, as a reminder, if you like great things with great tech and would like to feature in future episodes, please click on the link on the show notes, go to GTwGT.com and catch up on all episodes. This has been episode 72 of Great Things with Great Tech. Thanks, Gleb. Thanks, Backblaze. And we'll see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.